not charged enough, so I'm going to ask everyone to hang out for just 1 second while I recharge my battery.
109. Oh, here.
Doesn't matter. I said I heard. Right.
Who else has their drink ready?
I have just my Diet Coke. That's all I'm drinking today. And I just have to get caffeinated.
I've got water, Marcia.
I have water too.
But Marcia's drink looks really good, doesn't it? She's really ready for this. I like it. Thank you.
It's beautiful.
All right, guys, I apologize. My battery's back up and running. All right. So we're first going to start with some very clinical definitions about what enrichment is. And essentially, when I'm looking at enrichment, I know that it is a way of stimulating our brain by what's in our physical and social surroundings. So our brains can become more enriched by the people and the dogs that are around us, by the things that we are doing. And probably now more than ever, you guys are realizing this. Depending on what state that you live in, here in Michigan, we've been on lockdown almost since the beginning of March, probably the second week in March. And I know that a lot of people are experiencing boredom in lots of different situations. And so finding different types of enrichment is extremely important. And that boredom is really going to help us relate to what our dogs may be experiencing. So we also look at encouraging species typical behavior while increasing the animal's ability to cope with challenging situations. And what's really unique or important about that is that we need to make sure that whatever type of enrichment that we are selecting, that it's something that's going to be enjoyable for our dogs to do. If we don't select what is enjoyable for them and we give them enrichment that's appropriate for an elephant or a cat or an orangutan, then it's not going to be beneficial to our dogs. And so we really need to be selective to find out what is enjoyable and what's truly beneficial for them. Beneficial is kind of the key word. That's where we go to next, because enrichment really needs to enhance the quality of an animal's life while living in their environment. And when we think about big picture with enrichment, I think about animals in zoos or enclosures, but your house is very much an enclosure. And even though our dogs are very, very far from their wild counterparts, our ability to enrich their lives at home is really important. If you think about what their life typically entails, what their day entails, what makes up their 24 hours, what are the things that they are doing? Typically, enrichment may come in form of 2 meals a day, which for a Labrador takes under 30 seconds to eat each meal. They may have a couple of short walks or short play sessions, but all that probably builds up to no more than a couple of hours, and 22 of those 24 hours may be barren of enrichment. And so our goal, of course, is to really add to that and give them something to fulfill their time. One important note is that enrichment reduces stress, anxiety, and boredom, as well as promoting the human-animal bond. And the human-animal bond is our relationship and our partnership between our dogs. It's what keeps our bond healthy. And we hope that we start out with a good bond as puppy raisers, because we want to have that same wonderful relationship that gets passed on to our clients that are eventually going to receive our dogs. Enrichment often requires an animal to perform some sort of physical activity It's a direct interaction with an object or a being. And so the being doesn't always have to be human. It could be another animal of the same species or a different species, or it may be something physically that they have to manipulate in some way to interact with. So I really like this quote, and if you guys are not familiar with Fear Free Happy Homes, they have a wealth of behavior and training and such amazing material to look over. So it's something that you can Google and get some really great information. And my caveat is always going to be some of the information that they're going to share is going to be appropriate for future leader dogs, and some is not. So always refer back to your puppy manuals or check with somebody in puppy development to see if you're going to add something into your training protocol or some sort of enrichment for your future leader dog. Just check with us to see if it's appropriate. But one of the quotes that they shared is that evidence has shown that when animals live in dull environments void of enrichment, behavior problems are more likely to occur. And I don't know about you guys as puppy raisers, but my job, I think, as a puppy raiser is to really decrease as many behavior problems as I possibly can and try to avoid as many. Raising a puppy brings plenty of problems on its own, and so I don't want to enhance any. If I know that I can do some things to enrich my animal, my dog's life, and eliminate particular behavior problems in the future, that's what I'm definitely going to focus on. So this infographic has been around for many years, and it's one of my favorites when I think about it. I'm looking up in the upper left-hand corner of the yellow kind of goldenrod color box, and one of the things I love to think about is that 15 minutes of mental enrichment-based exercise is equivalent to walking or exercising our dog for about 1 mile. So in some of the situations that we're currently going through, being able to get our dogs outside on a regular basis and do a lot of exercise isn't always possible, but can we set up things to stimulate their brain within your home, work with them for about 15 minutes at a time, and they experience the same level of exhaustion? Definitely. Let's put this in people type of perspective. So when I'm planning for a lecture like this, and it takes time to put the slides together and research and have IT problems, it is extremely exhausting for me. I'm extremely tired when I'm done, but I didn't necessarily physically do any exercise. I didn't run a mile. I wasn't running a marathon. I wasn't standing on my hands when I was doing this presentation, but just putting it together and using that mental energy was extremely exhausting. And many of you guys have experienced this, and you probably haven't put the link together. But when you go to a training session with your puppy counselor, or at the end of a training weekend, you say, "My puppy was zonked." And once we got in the car, he passed out and we drove home and he was just out cold. And that's because of that mental exhaustion. And that went way beyond 15 minutes. So you know just how tired they are. So that's what I'd like to keep in mind is this infographic. When I know I need to increase my type of stimulation I'm doing, that it does have this type of benefit there. So one of the things that we are going to talk about is all of the different types of enrichment. And a lot of people are familiar with food or taste-based enrichment. That tends to be our go-to when we're talking about enrichment forms, but it does not end there. So we're going to start there today, but we have lots more to talk about. So food or taste-based enrichment is all about how we mimic what a captive animal would do in the wild for food. So a captive animal are undomesticated dog counterparts out in the wild. They are hunting, they are finding food sources. If food sources are buried, they have to dig for them. They're tearing things apart. All of that is part of their normal activity. And then, so what do we do as people? We pull out that shiny bowl, silver bowl, and we measure out a cup and a half or 2 cups of food and place it in the shiny bowl. And that's what our dogs get to eat out of, which is horribly not enriching whatsoever. And so I know that we can change things around and we can do some things to actually stimulate and enrich our dogs. What I like to think of is that our animals, and while this is a very dog-based lesson, and we're talking about our future leader dogs, they're not alone. We can actually teach them to work for every bit of food. And I can tell you guys a little bit about what I do with my personal dogs. I have just 2 personal dogs right now, one of which is a career changed leader dog. But I also did this for my future leader dogs when I was raising as well, is that I measure out their ration of dog food. And we know for a typical future leader dog, they're getting somewhere between 2 and 3 cups of food per day. So I measure that ration out. I put it in some sort of container, and I make sure that I use that throughout the day. My primary goal is to use each individual treat or kibble for some sort of reward or reinforcement for good behavior. A lot of times I have my treat pouch on, or I have little containers of food stashed around my house so that I know every time I see my dog doing something wonderful, a behavior that I want to see more of, something that I'm really impressed by, that I can reinforce them. And a couple of years ago, to drive home a point, I decided to count how much food is in 3 cups of Pro Plan adult. And we came up with about 570 odd pieces of kibble and 3 cups of adult Pro Plan food. So that tells me that I have at least 570 some odd opportunities to reinforce for good behaviors. Now, there may be days that you're busy and you don't use up all of that food. There may be days that your dog is not feeling good, whatever the situation, and that's where some of our food type puzzles come in. And I love our food puzzles. There are so many different selections available, whether they are commercially available now or things that you can make that are homemade, that we can put our ration of food in and have our dogs bop around to get them to dispense food. And we're gonna talk a little bit about that more in just 1 second. So if you have seen in zoos, if you visited any sort of zoos, you may see that food is hidden around their enclosure, making the animal actively search for it. And while we don't necessarily want our future leader dogs scavenging, again, we can do some similar things. There's nothing that is required about 1 bowl of dog food. If we want our dogs to quote unquote hunt for food, we can put our food in different bowls and maybe offer them in multiple locations of your house. So your dog has to go find where you hid them today, and they're able to eat out of those. Or different types of commercial food based puzzles or devices that encourage foraging, just like an animal would do out in the wild. Now, for our pet dogs at home that are not future leader dogs, I did put this little note in there that things like paper towel rolls and egg cartons and tissue boxes can be used as hiding devices for food. Of course, with our future leader dogs, we have to be very, very careful about discouraging, destroying any of those tools. So if you do any sort of research online about enrichment and food puzzle based enrichment, you may see some of these recommendations like paper towel rolls and egg cartons and tissue boxes. And while those are absolutely wonderful for our pet dogs, it's not something that I would recommend for our future leader dogs. I would focus solely only on our commercial-based toys. So hopefully everyone can see these toys. my camera's not picking them up. So this particular toy is something from, hold on. Can you guys see turquoise blue on the screen?
Not really, a little.
It came in and went out.
It's
It
kind of
came in.
dancing around.
Oh, just a little. Oh,
You need to change your background. It's blacking it out.
All right. One second. How about now?
There you go.
yes.
All right.
Hey, Melissa,
So-
I have a really quick question about that bowl.
Sure.
So the question for me, and I had this question from someone else in the chat, that there is one of these bowls that frustrates my dog. So if the enrichment is too frustrating for them, would you go forward with it, or would you maybe try a different form of enrichment?
That is a great question. Thank you so much, Laura. So enrichment is not about frustration. It is about enjoyment. And so if you find that your dog is becoming frustrated, then we're not in the realm of enriching whatsoever, and we need to do something very different. That may be make the food easier to get out. It may be, instead of using something like dry treats or kibble.
On the leader dog for the blind page. Yeah, I'm just saying it's a video you can watch later.
If we're using kibble or dry food to get out, then you may consider just putting something like peanut butter around the rim and allow the dog to lick that off. So that makes it easier to get out and they're more successful. This is not the only type of food puzzle toy that's out there. There are so many different toys that are available commercially. So if you find that your dog is frustrated with that one, then move to a different one. We also have different ways of making them hard too. This is another one of my favorite commercially available toys. This is called the Kong Wobbler. And so the Kong Wobbler, it's just like the old style Weeble Wobble. So here's the inside vessel. You can fit in this size, I think this is considered to be the small one. You can fit about 2 cups of food in, 2 or 3 cups of food, and your dog has to bat it about to get it to dispense food. And food flows right outside of the hole here. If you find that that is too easy, and some pet owners are going to find that it's too easy, then you can make it more difficult just simply by putting something like a ball in there. And again, we're not going to encourage ball play for future leader dogs, but you can put a ball inside here, and that blocks the flow of how the food is coming out, and you can make it more difficult as well.
You can also, on that one, you can put a small piece of tape on the inside to partially cover the hole. It works good with the puppy chow.
Good, excellent. All right, so back to the presentation, guys.
But I can log into the meeting on my phone. And then when I get home, I can do my tablet or whatever. It's not a big deal.
Just a reminder, everyone, to please mute your microphones.
Okay, so Laura, can you see the screen? Are we back on PowerPoint?
Melissa,
I can't see the microphone at all.
No, I don't see the screen either, Melissa.
So you don't see PowerPoint?
No.
Nope, I only see my old icon, so I know this is not the correct screen.
Laura clicked on the window that shows the participants right now.
Okay.
That's a long time ago. All right, now we gotta do it again. You ready?
Oop.
Smile good.
It's
Do you
there now.
guys see it?
Now
Okay.
I see the presentation, Melissa.
Awesome.
There you
Yes.
go.
What would the world be without technical issues? It would be boring. All right. So I want to go on to different types of enrichment because the food puzzles are by far the easiest types of enrichment. Those are the ones that we are most familiar with. But those I don't want to focus on. I want to focus on some unique versions. One of my favorites is visual enrichment. So things that we are doing to stimulate what is in our sight for our dogs. One of the things that I just saw from one of our puppy raisers about a week ago was that she was encouraging her grandson to blow bubbles outside for her dogs. And again, I look to see what is the reaction of the dog. Are they stimulated and enjoying it and they're inquisitive, or are they becoming stressed by it? My reminder is always enrichment is not successful if it's causing stress, vigilance, or reactivity. But if we have a dog that's just watching bubbles blow by in the wind, that is a great form of enrichment. For cats, and this is just a little heads up, you can buy scented bubbles in some situations, and cats really like scented bubbles. Leader Dog utilizes things like mobiles, very much like we have mobiles over a baby's crib, and we can actually find things for the dogs to look at. We also encourage this in our host homes. So the ones that are our breeding host homes that house our females and our baby puppies, we have stimulation overhead, very similar to baby mobiles, but they're different shapes, different colors that the puppies can walk through, look up, and explore these different types of enrichment. So how could you combine this as a puppy raiser? You could potentially have some sort of mobile just above your puppy's crate at the time of your departure. So wherever you leave them in your home, when you're not there and when they're crated, you can have a mobile just on top of their crate to stimulate their environment. You can also have artwork. If you have ever been in the older portions of Leader Dog, previously we had murals and artwork on the walls for our dogs, and we can encourage this very much at home. I like to look to see what's in my animal's environment. Is it stimulating or is it boring? Are they just facing a white wall, or do they get to look at something very interesting in your absence while they're in their crate? You can put things like mirrors, or you can put artwork or different photos up for them to investigate and look and inquire about. I also like to look at the view through a window. And again, my question is the animal reactive? Well, if we have their crate face towards the front window with a busy street and you have lots of people walking by with dogs and there are cars, that may be stressful and frustrating for your dog. So I would recommend that instead of focusing our crate near that direction, maybe you do it in your backyard where they can watch birds and wildlife go by. And again, our question is always going to be, is this exciting for them? Are they enjoying watching the world go by, or are they getting stressed watching this view? There are dog-specific TV programs out there. I personally have DirecTV, and though I have not watched it, I do know that there are channels that are commercially available, and there are DVDs that are commercially available that have dog-based TV programming that are supposed to be visually stimulating. And again, it's of course going to be dependent on your dogs, whether that is something that's of benefit or not. every single dog is unique. And so what my goal is to offer a whole bunch of things that you can keep in your back pocket and that you can try with your future leader dog to see what works best for them. So aside from visual enrichment, we have auditory enrichment, or what's going on with their ears, what they can hear. And sound is important because it soothes the dog. It can mask outside noises. It can help the dog become habituated to human voices or information of around town sounds. If you have not heard at Lead Your Dog on our campus, we play classical music, which I think is so valuable. And there are a couple of different types of classical music. Through a Dog's Ear is by far one of the most popular brands. And that's something, again, that's commercially available that you can buy very easily or you can download on your own. It's something that I have personally downloaded on my iPhone. And if I ever find that my dogs are aroused or overstimulated or frustrated, I can very easily pull out my phone, turn on my iTunes, and let my dogs hear that particular music. I've done it for myself while I'm driving in a vehicle. Sometimes I am transporting future leader dogs, and so I will actually play it in my car. Some people say it's a little bit concerning because you don't want to get too relaxed yourself, and it does have the same effect on people. It can very much relax you. But it's beneficial for our dogs to either help decrease their anxiety or give them some sort of auditory stimulation as well. The Through a Dog's Ear specifically is made or designed by a human audiologist and a veterinary neurologist. And they took existing classical music and rearranged the beats slightly so that it decreases your heart rate. And there are different forms, either for senior dogs or for puppies or adult dogs. There are also versions that intermix sounds such as thunderstorms and fireworks and waiting room sounds and telephones and cats and birds, so that they can help to adapt and become comfortable with those sounds. So those are just a few versions that are out there. The Divinity of Dogs is another one that's out there as well. Pet Acoustics is another one out there. And there's some more recent studies that were done that says playing reggae is also beneficial for dogs to decrease anxiety as well. Something that we have not quite explored at Leader Dog, but we have talked about is the use of audiobooks. And this is something that you can consider as well. If you have a dog that might be stressed going in a crate, consider playing an audiobook in your absence, and that can decrease anxiety just by having a human voice there. Leaving a TV on is something that is possible for auditory enrichment, but I'm always very cautious about what channel you are listening to. And if it's something like the Weather Channel and there's a thunderstorm or loud noises, that can actually be very arousing. And so I try to avoid that. Here's a sampling of Through a Dog's Ear. Hopefully you can hear that coming through. I know that I've personally played it for myself before, and it has decreased my own anxiety as well. Another form of enrichment is tactile enrichment. And this is just simply interacting with your dog physically. And there's so many different forms of this that we can either do on a formal basis or an informal basis. If you have heard of T-Touch before, by a woman named Linda Tellington Jones, that is something that we really promote at Leader Dog. And it's a form of enrichment that we encourage our volunteers to give to the dogs and puppies that are on site, as a way of decreasing their anxiety. And T-Touch specifically is a way of manipulating their skin to decrease their anxiety, whereas massage therapy is a way of manipulating the muscles to decrease anxiety and aid in comfort. I also look at tactile enrichment as a part of husbandry because grooming can be really enjoyable for some dogs. I do find that some are absolutely opposed to it as well. So we have to find out, is this one of those enjoyable interactions or is this not enjoyable interaction? Can we teach it to be an enjoyable interaction or do we need to do something different? Petting itself can be enjoyable for many dogs, but not every area of their body is also enjoyable. Not all dogs appreciate having the top of their head petted. Many appreciate their chest or under their chin to be petted. And so you just need to explore that relationship, watch for very subtle cues. And if your dog doesn't appreciate that type of interaction, select a different area for petting or for massage or for T-touch. Nose can do a lot for our olfactory enrichment. And one of the facts that I really like to think in the back of my mind about is that a dog's nose has about 300 million scent receptors, whereas a human's nose only has 56 million. So to put this in a different perspective, when we walk into a McDonald's, we can smell French fries and we can smell hamburgers and all this wonderful stuff, whereas dogs can smell the difference between pickles and onions and the flour for the buns and sesame seeds and mustard and oil. So their nose is very, very discreet, which is why we have our sister company like Elite Detection Canine, and that's the dog that's featured in the photo here. They can be very precise at detecting different things, such as bombs, media detection, seizure detection, and so we can actually do things to enrich them via their nose. The use of essential oils such as lavender, vanilla, chamomile, almond oil, things like that, diluted with water and sprayed on a cotton ball, can be very enjoyable for your dog to explore. And while we don't want them to accidentally ingest it, putting that in something like a storage container and poking a couple of holes in it, in the lid, can allow them a safe way of interacting and smelling that. Definitely taking them out for scent walks. And this is something that's especially enjoyable right now because the weather's warming up, their critters are coming out, and all of the good smells are out there. So dedicating a walk, not necessarily just for exercise, but standing at the end of our leash and letting our dogs explore a specific scent for as long as they want is extremely enriching. Exchanging bedding or soft toys with other dogs can be interesting to pick up somebody else's smells. Just think when you come home and you've been with another dog and a dog really explores your clothing up and down and they can tell that you've been with another dog, they're picking up all of those scent receptors. And so that's got lots of interesting information on it. Even taking out old worn clothes from your hamper and allowing your dog to interact with it can be extremely enjoyable for them as well. All right, guys. So I hope that you really enjoyed this presentation on enrichment. There are so many different types out there that you can offer for your future leader dog. And I think of these as boredom busters right now. Many of us are stuck in our homes and we're not able to get out and do the traditional forms of training that we are used to. But it doesn't end there because we can use all of these different forms of enrichment to bring a better level of care to our future leader dogs. So if you have any questions, I would be happy to answer them now.
Hey, Melissa, maybe you could point out what types of enrichment, maybe, or toys or things that they're really, most of them are for you to use in conjunction with your dog so that maybe they're not for something that you put in your crate that they're not using unattended.
Right. Yeah. So definitely refer back to our list of appropriate and safe toys that we provide for our puppy raisers. And of course, that list is available in your manual. So there are things that are going to be safe to be left alone. and things that are not going to be safe to left alone. And I always say going in and using a toy, even some of the toys that are considered to be indestructible, some of the Kong-based products, I really need my dog to prove to me that they're not going to be destructible. So before I would ever leave a toy in a crate unattended, I make sure that I have spent a lot of time with that toy and with my dog to see how they interact with it. Do I consider my dog a heavy chewer in general? Do I consider them a heavy chewer with that particular toy? Did me putting peanut butter on it or a little bit of yogurt amplify how they interact with it? Are they trying to destroy it to get that last little bit of food out? All of those, while they can be extremely enriching, we have to worry about their GI system as well. And we don't want them to swallow or ingest any pieces. So we have to be ultra careful with that. Anything that they can chew or break pieces off of, anything that gets too small. Some of our puppy toys, and as they grow, they just become too small for our dogs. Those really should be eliminated as well. Again, when we talked about the scent-based toys and the olfactory types of enrichment, we have to be ultra careful. Again, I don't necessarily leave cotton balls out for my dogs to explore, but I put them in Tupperware containers with holes in them so that they can explore that type of material. I may even take a little bit of fur from another dog and put that in a container for them to smell as well.
Something that I do, just for those of you who are kind of stuck at home and maybe you haven't got your new toys in the mail or what have you, is that I might make my toys different by putting them together. So I know lots of our Westpaw toys, you can make them a little bit more difficult or challenging by putting them inside of each other. You can maybe put the end of your nylabone inside a Kong, so the toy looks different and is just in it and looks a different way. It can be sometimes be enriching for the dog to figure out how that works.
Melissa, we had a great question from Beverly. She said, would allowing a spot to dig be considered enrichment activity also?
That is a tricky question, and thank you, VJ, for posing that. And Bev, that's a wonderful question. So I'm going to give a two-part answer because part of my answer is going to be separate of what we would do for an official leader dog candidate and what we would do for our pet dogs. So we do find that some dogs are very much prone to digging. And if we give them an appropriate location to dig in, sometimes that satisfy that need. So there are some thoughts out there that you can take something like a kids play pool or a plastic storage bin and facilitate digging in that particular area. We do have to be careful though, if we are doing something like a sand box or dirt box that our dog is not adjusting sand pieces in there, or we're not encouraging digging to a point that it becomes a problematic behavior that they take with them and try in other locations. So I would say, to officially answer your question, Bev, it really depends. Of course, it's something that you do need to try with your dog first and supervise. See if it simply fulfills a need and they let it go. Or if it's something that they become obsessed over, we have to be very careful not to encourage it too much. But that's a great question. All right, guys, thank you so much for joining in this session. Just in a couple of days, this will be available on YouTube so that you can find that with the link with all of our other talks. And then on today's Tuesday, so Thursday, Laura will be back with, Laura, are you doing Tuesday or Thursday or Saturday? I think Laura Fisher is our Thursday person, and VJ is our Saturday person
Yep,
this week.
I am doing Thursday at 12 noon. You'll get an invitation tomorrow with the link in it. We are going to be putting on the bandana and putting on the jacket. So if you are a first-time raiser and you have not used these yet because you haven't had the opportunity to be out in public, there's still some practicing that you can be doing and put them on. So you can come and join me and I'll show you how to put on the jacket and bandana.
And then VJ, for Saturday, what do you have going on?
Hi guys, for Saturday, we're going to be outdoors with platforms and surfaces. Unless it's cold, then we're going to be indoors and pretend like we're outdoors.
And when is your session on Saturday?
Oh, of course, Saturday at 10 a.m. and that's Eastern Standard Time.
Awesome. Thank you guys so much for attending, and cheers, happy hour. Thank you guys.
Cheers,
Bye everyone.
Cheers.